Welcome to episode 13 of the Selective Podcast. I'm your host, XR. This week joining me on the pod is Drew Joyner. He's the founder and creative director at Edward Joyner, founder and host of the Beyond the Glamour podcast. And he's also involved with Small Hours magazine in collaboration with Miah and Alexander Walker, And this man also has a YouTube channel. If the resume just didn't get any longer, this guy's work is super extensive and impressive. We're gonna get into his background, fashion, working as a content creator, and more. Let's get right into it. Drew, bro, how are you doing today, man? Good to have you on the pod.
XR, thank you for having me, man. I've been waiting to say this. I was glad I was selected for the selective. I mean, I had to put that in there.
He's been thinking about that one all week.
All week, man. But no, seriously, I'm feeling good. I'm doing well. Colorado's weather has been nice.
Yeah, man.
Sunny. It's been sunny. It's been hot. Not like East Coast hot. I heard it's like crazy hot in the East Coast. I don't know how it is down in Texas right now, but I heard it's been crazy. It's been like 70s here. So yeah. I'm living a good life right now.
That's good, man. Yeah. As the audience know, those listening, I'm still in Texas right now, and it's hot. It's just hot. So just trying to enjoy the sun and the summer weather as much as I can. I'm glad Colorado's teaching you well, dude. Treating you well.
Dude. I mean, the difference between Colorado heat, Texas heat is just dry heat here. So the humidity is a little bit of a different element in my opinion. I don't like it as much, but Colorado's been decent. It's been decent. So
yeah, man, Texas is humid. It's hot. But I'm glad you're doing well and the summer's moving along, bro.
Thank you,
man. Just like I said in the intro, your resume is extensive. You're working on a lot of things, a lot of projects in and around the fashion industry, bro. But before we get into that, your background, where you from? I know you mentioned in Colorado. On your podcast, you talk about Denver a lot. What you're doing out there. But yeah, just give the people some background, a little bit about you, man.
Definitely. So for those who don't know me, my name is Drew Joyner. I am a 23-year-old, I'll just call it creative because XR definitely listed out all the things that I do, which is a lot of things, but I kind of like it like that. Born and raised in Denver, went to University of Denver, played basketball, played Division I basketball, played Division III basketball, was a hooper all my life. And kind of has transitioned into this next phase of my life, which I like to call, creativity and arts and fashion, right? And so I've been enjoying my postgraduate life, obviously with COVID and everything, it's as much as you can enjoy it, but I've been busy at work and I've been really, really hungry, man, really hungry.
Hungry indeed, man. The hunger is there just based on all the projects you work on. And we'll talk about all your projects at length and kind of, get into what you're doing. But I know you mentioned basketball. You talk about it a lot on your podcast and how basketball has kind of been an instrumental part of not only your early life, but even post playing, how it's influenced you now. So yeah, how has basketball molded your vision on life? I mean, is it work ethic? Has it impacted your personal clothing style? How has basketball affected you?
Yeah, I would say it's impacted, everything, style, mentality, and we can kind of dive deeper into it. So in terms of, my life, I would say for the majority of my life, even to this point, I'm really in a new period of my life, right? Where basketball isn't the primary focus or the primary kind of thing I think about day in and day. I still watch a lot of hoops and look at a lot of hoopers, a lot of young guys coming up, things like that. But when I was young, I wanted to be in the NBA. Like a lot of young kids, a lot of young Black kids want to be in the NBA. A lot of young players want to be in the NBA. Right. And so I went after that goal as hard as I could go after it. I worked hard, put tons of hours in the gym.
It was your life.
It was my life. I sacrificed so many hours. Sometimes, I don't think people understand how much you have to sacrifice to really, for me at least, unless you're very, very talented at something. And that's and this is kind of where I get into, unless you're very talented at whatever you do, basketball, fashion, fashion design, architectural design, you can be talented at that thing and maybe not have to put as many hours into it. But for, the vast majority of people, if you really want something, you have to have that hunger and that drive to put in the time and sacrifice the time and the discipline to actually get it done. So I would say from a mentality standpoint, I've learned a lot of those really important kind of characteristics from the game because you have to be disciplined. You have to have a drive and it's so hard, right? When you're young and you're trying to learn the game. And this is, my experience even right now of fashion when I'm young in the game of fashion, if I want to call it that.
Yeah.
you have to be willing to fail, pick yourself back up and try it again and again and again, and kind of be laughed at or looked at kind of weird, or have just kind of just lonely moments, right?
Yeah,
so,
and I'm sure you experience that, like, not only playing, but even like post your time playing, bro. Like at some point, it must have clicked in your mind that, look, my dream of going to the NBA isn't going to happen, and I'm sure that was a very, very hard realization, especially somebody who played in college as well, right? Like that's even playing college ball is like a dream that most people don't get to play. And I'm sure like this life post basketball has been, I mean, weird to not have it around, if that's the correct word to say it.
Yeah, totally. You're totally right. It has been a little bit weird because your whole MO, your whole life is surrounded by basketball players, coaches, assistants, trainers. Like it's almost like a whole nother life that I literally am starting, that I don't think people will really be able to grasp, because what I do now is so far removed from that. And it's kind of beautiful in a way, right? The journey is over, and I can still talk about the journey, but I really appreciate the journey now more than ever, and I can kind of communicate that within a different creative sphere, which is fashion, right?
100%. And speaking of fashion, man, you have your own brand, Edward Joyner. I want to talk about kind of like the mindset around starting a brand, but also like creating a name and a vision for the brand. So the brand is named after yourself. What's the thought process that went into that? And was that something that you wanted to do from the beginning, was to name it after yourself?
I think a lot of people, they kind of go back and forth with whether or not it's good to name a brand after yourself or after your own namesake. I think a lot of people, some people like it, some people don't like it. Obviously, you have a lot of names out there. You have, Reese Cooper, and
I think it's hard, bro.
It's very hard, et cetera, et cetera. You have a lot of brands out there that do that, right? And the reasoning for me was, I wanted to be able to live with the name for forever, and I have to live with the name for forever. So for me, I'm like, okay, I can name it, Goo Goo Gaga, whatever.
Yeah.
Not to joke on anybody whose name is a little bit outside of the norm. But as a 22-year-old, 23-year-old, I know in my maturity, I'm not fully there. Like, I just know that. Like, from the moment I, entered into the world, when I was a kid, I liked Spider-Man, and then I liked Batman, and then I liked X, Y, and Z superhero. And that's the same for just everyone has these different interests. And that's just an example, right? Not even really fashion related. But I knew for me, I wanted to have a name that I could just be stuck with and love for the long haul, because I really see my brand as something that I want to pursue for the long term. So that's kind of the first reason behind it. And what was the other question you had asked?
Well, I mean, just to stay on that point, man, you're right. Is that like sometimes, we come up with names for brands, and maybe the love for that original name changes over time. Maybe you kind of grow out of that. Whereas your name, and I think you mentioned this on your podcast too, with some guests that you've had who have brands named after themselves, is that like your name's not going to change. It's something that's going to stick with you forever. So it's kind of like almost like a failsafe, if you will, right? Like, you can associate your name with this brand, and that's never going to change.
Definitely.
And we've seen brands like Reese Cooper, for example, where like now when you say Reese Cooper, it's synonymous with not only the man, but also the brand itself. And I think that's something really powerful that a lot of creatives could take note when they're trying to create their own vision of a brand. I don't know if you agree with that.
I do to some degree. I think for whenever I give like recommendations to other creators, XR, a huge level of self-awareness has to be taken into, account. Every person is going to be a little bit different, and I recognize that. And while for me, like I'm saying for myself that Edward Joyner made sense for me, but if you want to name your brand, like for example, one of the brands I really enjoy watching out of New York is, Devontae Ivory's Boy Blondie. I like his graphics. I like what he does. I like his cadence. The brand Boy Blondie has probably nothing to do with Devontae's name.
Right.
Right. But I think it still plays well for him. So at the end of the day, you have to understand what you're trying to accomplish with whatever project you're trying to put out, and kind of make the decision based on that. Right. Whether it be naming it for yourself or naming it the Selective or whatever.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And it needs to stick and have I guess like, when there are names out there that become synonymous with the vision of the brand. And I think that's, it's really cool. Ore New York is another good example of that, right? Like when you think of Ore, you think of
Yes.
Ray, you think of what he's doing, you think of New York City, for example,
Mhm.
and it's
Yes,
just kind of like synonymous with the brand.
definitely. Definitely.
For your brand, you've grown it, and it has been growing, and you released a lot of really interesting products, even products outside of the clothing space.
Yeah.
So what is the vision for Edward Joyner as a brand?
The vision for Edward Joyner as a brand, it's a loaded question because I think that there are a lot of pillars. Not a lot. There are like 3 or 4 pillars that I definitely want to highlight.
Mhm.
The first one I want to start with is sustainability. Because I think
Yeah.
and I don't want to talk about it as like this idea because I feel like that is done a lot, the idea of sustainable fashion or sustainable living. And I'm not here to preach a lifestyle to anybody by any means,
Mm.
but I think sustainability for us, and it's something I learned while at university, was that like, if you're a company that doesn't think about your social corporate responsibility, a term that we use a lot in marketing, which was my major.
Yeah.
So if you don't understand your social corporate responsibility, which is essentially your ability to, or how you impact the world with the products that you make, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you don't understand how that impacts, not social, but just like environmental justice. So whether or not you
Yeah.
pollute to local communities, or whether or not you're contributing to extra waste within the oceans, those things like that, then you're doing, the people in the world a disservice, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so for us, like where we kind of try to be sustainable at is where we source our garments. And so one of the things that for a lot of our garments, they're sourced in Canada. We know that Canada's laws and regulations towards workers' rights are excellent. And so that's why we do what we do there. And the cotton and the cotton and the just textiles are sourced from the United States. Also, obviously we have different accessorized products like water bottles, and candles that are all natural, things like that also try to push that envelope for sustainability, and just for a lifestyle brand that pushes that envelope for sustainability. So sustainability is definitely one of those things.
Mm-hmm.
Another one of those things is just kind of a very easily communicated design, right? I talk about this sometimes a lot. For me personally, because I want to create the bulk share of what we make for the brand. And as someone who doesn't have true design experience, as someone who doesn't have true artistic experience, like I'm really kind of just bootstrapping it at this point, but I'm learning a lot, and I'm growing a lot too, which I've seen in the past few years. For us right now, the simplicity of the designs and the easily communicated designs, I think just boast well for myself as a creative and for, what I hope to bring to the marketplace, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I think lastly, I want to build community, right? So the brand Edward Joyner is obviously it sells products, but the brand is kind of like an umbrella for the podcast, like you talked about, for the publication, which is not as good as Between the Seams as a blog, but trying to do those things as well, right? To bring community and just bring education on sustainable fashion and just different ideas, new ideas, fresh ideas. So yeah, hopefully I explained that well. The beginning was a little bit choppy, but we made it through.
No, man. Honestly, you explained that beautifully, and I appreciate you plugging my blog Between the Seams. I really appreciate that. And I think the lifestyle part of a brand is something that's growing a lot, and we've seen that grow. And I kind of wanted to segue into what I wanted to ask you next. A lot of creatives are shifting from or into creating household products in addition to clothes. I don't know if you view it as a trend, call it what you will. I really enjoy it. I know you mentioned with your brand, y'all have come out with hoodies, beanies, crew necks, really beautiful pieces, like beautiful, like staple pieces that I think everybody can add to the rotation. But you've also added things like water bottles, beautiful candles. And then the bottle that you're actually drinking out of right now, it's a glass water bottle that says Edward Joyner. Beautiful, beautiful water bottle with like this nice, beautiful, like minty tint to it. It's just a beautiful piece. I know you mentioned this before, but BPA free, non-toxic, resistant to high temperatures. I mean, just a very, very beautiful piece. So, I mean, do you see this lifestyle view of a brand as a trend, or do you see it as just an extension of making clothes as well, if that makes sense?
I think it's an extension. I think a brand would be remiss to not include lifestyle products within their ethos, just because there's just so much of an opportunity to communicate who you are even better, right? Like clothes, and maybe it's not for every brand, but like for example, we talk about Ore. He just had a jewelry case or a jewelry container.
Beautiful, and he's done wallets too, like
wallets. The gamut, basketballs. He's done so many different things, and I think that it only can really benefit what your brand speaks towards, right? The things that you're interested because Ray, obviously as a creator, he's interested in those things and obviously wants to create those products for himself. So it just boasts well for his creativity. And for me, I've always as a hooper, you always need a water bottle. And so even though it's a much more elegant kind of way of having a water bottle than like just a Gatorade squirter or something like that. Right. But even as an adult, like I'm always reaching for a water bottle. So for me, it's something that's a no-brainer, and it hits the sustainability mark because you reduce the amount of plastic waste that you use. And then, as I've gotten older, and this is one of the things that we just touched on, like, the lifestyle products, like candles. We made candles last year and they were a huge hit. We're going to do them again because they were just,
and beautiful candles too. They look incredible.
Yeah. And the thing is like, I have to give a huge shout out to my partner, Lauren, who's also my girlfriend, who really did a fantastic job of making sure we hit all the non-toxic benchmarks, like coconut oil, all natural beeswax, all natural essential oils, recycled glass, all of these things, like just check for us. And like we like, if we saw this as a public product, we'd be like salivating because those things for us like just mean that person is giving that attention to detail, right? So I don't think it's necessarily a trend. I think a trend is an interesting way to kind of talk about it. But I do think it's I do think a lot of brands for a long time have released lifestyle products. And I think some of my favorite, some of the biggest ones, obviously the high end, the luxury brands, the Louis Vuittons, the Dior's, the everything. They've come out with everything you can think of, to trunk cases, to
luggage, the whole thing.
Luggage. Hermes just did the air tags, everything.
I mean, Hermes used to make horse stables. They still do. I'm pretty sure you can still commission horse stables through Hermes. So I mean, yeah, you're right. It's just,
if your pocketbook is big enough,
anything's possible, right?
Anything's possible. And so to get to that level of craftsmanship is really powerful as well. And I think it's really fun, like to have all those options available as well. Like like I'm looking at your bookshelf behind you, like to be able to make a bookshelf would be incredible. Because I love reading like books and manga and things like that. Like anything that's conceivable, that's within the means of creativity. I think that for me, I would never want to limit myself to just clothing. I think clothing is just a form of creativity, right?
Right. So. Yeah, it's beautiful, man. It's beautiful. Recently, y'all had the Spring in the Rockies. It's a minimal t-shirt, a beautiful t-shirt, and the design is really nice. It's like a heather gray shirt, and on it says Edward Joyner, and it has a little I don't want to say a stick figure, but it's very simplistically drawn of a guy on a bike, and he's like going through the Rockies, and it's called Spring in the Rockies, and I think it's such a nice, beautiful, simple, minimal shirt, and that kind of goes into like the shorts y'all have made. Y'all have made shorts. And they're just like simple and minimal as well. The hoodies. So the brand is just, to me, it hits all the marks for not only sustainability, like you talked about, but also like minimal wear and stuff that you can really, get wear out of. And, I have to give it to you, man. That water bottle is something special, bro. I'll throw a picture up on the pod. It's beautiful. So, hats off to you for creating something like that.
Thank you, man. And I really do appreciate it, XR. It's been an unbelievable journey so far, and it's only been, it's been a year since we've been in business, and so we've got a long ways to go in terms of our creative front. But every drop, I aim to just continue to push that envelope just a little bit further, right? And I really do appreciate your compliments. I really do. Yeah, man. And speaking of looking to the future, any projects down the pipe that are coming soon? Any long-term visions for the brand? What's next for the brand? Yeah, so just like I said, not limiting myself, kind of just having all creative of just repertoire, all creative ideas being flushed out. So we have some trucker hats coming. That'll be really, really fun. We're gonna do candles again.
Yes.
We have new versions of beanies again. Looking into pants. Then obviously, I think in 2022 we might even dabble into, carpenter pants, things of those nature.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that I'm kind of calculating and thinking of that I'm really excited about for the brand. That I think a brand's starter pack is, you come out with some very unique tops, essentially, right? Typically right, and you try to get your bearing on production and how to produce, and where you're going to source from, and where's the best place to source, and where you're going to produce. And in fact, this is actually really an interesting point I want to just talk about for a second.
Go for it.
Because one of my favorite brands I look at a lot, I was introduced in like 2017, is Aimé Leon Dore. Obviously, it's a huge, very popular brand right now. Almost to the point where it's very mainstream, even though it used to be a subculture.
Yeah.
Great brand. It is a great brand. A lot of their items, initially I remember them being made in Canada, and now they're moved to being made in Portugal. And I've realized, and a lot of people have shown me and kind of brought it to me, a lot of their maybe not even newer items, but a lot of the items are being made in China. And obviously, for us, we've sourced from Canada, we've sourced from, the East, things like that. Or, obviously overseas is what I'm trying to say. And I think it's a really interesting point, because I feel like a lot of times we automatically associate, things that are made in China
as bad, right?
With a lower quality, right? And I think I do that. I still do it, right?
Yeah.
And I think obviously there are a lot of foul practices around the world when it comes to production styles and whatnot. But I'm really going to do a ton of research. In fact, I'm going to make a video about this. We haven't even talked about the YouTube section yet, but I really want to really dive in, because I know a lot of business owners. I know a lot of fashion owners who source their garments from all over, US, Canada, Portugal, you name it. I know exactly. And I the quality is, what you see, but I really want to just provide a space on YouTube for people who are wondering, what does it mean to be made in China? What does it mean to be made in Canada? What does it mean to be made in Portugal? What does it mean to be made in the US? What does it mean to be made in Thailand or Bangladesh or India? Like, it's just kind of a sidetrack, but I want to put that out there because I think it's going to be a really fun project for me in the coming weeks. So,
well, I look forward to that, and I look forward to you diving deeper into that. I know obviously with the brand, one of the first things that people have to think about is sourcing, where their product is coming from, where the materials are coming from, and even then, I mean, you can have cotton grown in the U.S. and it's sewn together in Canada. It's sewn together somewhere else, So there's a lot of nuances. I mean, there's a lot of intricacies that go on with making clothes. So, I'm looking forward to that project for yourself.
Thank you.
And the Beyond the Garment podcast, would it be fair to say it's an extension of the brand itself?
Yes, I would say it's an extension of the brand, but I think it's tough because I think some people will experience it without the brand. You know what I mean? Like some people will just listen, and some people do just listen to the podcast, but couldn't give a lick about the brand. You know what I mean?
Right.
So,
right.
I define it as an extension of the brand for sure.
And on the podcast, talk a lot about culture, sustainability, fashion. You bring a lot of really good interviews with people in and around the industry, people from all corners of the globe. And you've had some really great guests on the podcast. Why did you start it, and what's the goal with the pod?
So I started the Beyond the Garment podcast as a way to learn, right? So I just stopped playing basketball. I'm entering into fashion. How do I talk to people who have answers that I need without coming off as needy? You know what I mean?
Damn, that's a great way to put it. So you just bring them on the pod and interview them. Let them talk their mind, right?
So you want a pro tip for anybody out there? If it's starting a podcast isn't for everybody. It's a little bit scary. Obviously you got to have a little bit of skill, but it's a skill that you can learn, right? Yeah. But if you want to learn something, you want to pick someone's mind who's an industry leader, you want to learn about how X, Y, and Z does their brand, you start a podcast.
Damn.
And so the tactical nature of that for me was a no-brainer. So there's that aspect, but there's also other aspects. Once you start your podcast, I started with my friends. Like my best friend was like my second episode, and my first episode was like me, and the third episode was like my girlfriend. so you got to start somewhere, right? It doesn't just happen overnight. It's been another year in the works.
Yeah.
But for me also, what I realized is that the podcast is not just about me. I can't just be selfish, right?
Right.
The ability to serve others, the ability to facilitate a conversation like you're doing right now, so that someone can listen to into perpetuity and get value from it is so valuable, right? One of the things I talked to Liberty and Fox about, Karen Anthony,
great episode, by the way.
Absolutely love that episode. Who is the senior director of merchandising, global merchandising for Nike and Calvin Klein underwear? One of the things I said on that podcast was that, I host a podcast every week, right?
Yeah.
It's 30, 45 minutes, kind of like the Selective, right?
Yeah.
Someone who's listening to my podcast week in and week out, they may spend more time listening to me, my voice, than they spend talking to their parents during that week. So that obligation, that opportunity really to facilitate a conversation that enriches their life, which is like the opening line of the podcast, is so large that I don't take that for granted. And every time I try to have a podcast, I try to facilitate a valuable conversation.
I like that answer, man. I think it's a beautiful answer because same thing with the Selective Pod too, and you know as well, there are a lot of other people doing great fashion podcasts right now. Alexander Walker, Business of Fashion, Throwing Fits. I mean, there's a lot of fashion podcasts in and around. Issa's doing a great job with his too. And it's cool how we can all like coexist in this space and facilitate conversations. And, when we started this pod, one of the things that attracted me the most was just being able to learn and to, facilitate conversations and just have people like pick my brain and me pick their brain and just talk about the industry and things going on in and around the industry. I think the friendships and the conversations I've had, doing this pod, and I'm sure you can say the same for yours, has been
totally.
Inspirational. I've learned so much, and that is invaluable for your life. I think,
It really is. I think like the people who get the most value out of a podcast is the host, like the person who gets to actually talk. And I like, not to like make it seem like it's some grandiose thing, but it's just the truth. I feel like, right. Like you and I get to have this conversation. Someone else is listening to it obviously right now. Yeah. Like hopefully you guys are enjoying, but it's a really the value between me and you,
Yeah, dude. And it's so weird. It's crazy how you said that, because it kind of just like hit me like a wall. Like everything that you just said, I'm like, wait a minute, like that is so true. Hosting a podcast is such a blessing because you just get to talk to people, and especially in fashion, with hobbies that you like, it's just a way to learn more about people, and I think it's a beautiful thing. And I'm glad you decided to do it, and I'm looking forward to what you have in store for the pod. I listen week in and week out, and it's a great podcast. Super excited for that. But on the other side of that coin, right, outside of podcasting, you also have a freaking YouTube channel, dude. And like, and you just did a great video about vintage Levi's, which I enjoyed. I really, really loved that video. I thought it was really well done, very informative. That's the kind of content I like, informative content, really like relaxed and chill. But man, you have a podcast, you have a brand. Why the hell are you doing YouTube too?
Why or what?
Why?
I think
just another avenue for you.
Well, I think YouTube is. I've always been enamored like by YouTube, like YouTubers, like actually crazy stat I just heard today. Like 7 billion or no, 1 billion hours of YouTube are consumed like every day or something like that, or something ridiculous. Yeah. More YouTube is watched per day than network TV combined, all network television combined. So that's how do I lead into my next point on that? That's a cool fact.
and it just showcases the power of the platform, right?
Right. Totally. I think also XR, like, I think a lot of people don't think about it like the way I'm going to explain it right now. Mm-hmm. So, for the brand, for my podcast, for YouTube, they all kind of synergize, right? And I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook. I mean, those platforms aren't as good as, those other.
Yeah, but they're good for professional avenues, right?
Exactly. But they all connect in some way, right? And so imagine there's someone out there who is willing to listen to your content, who's willing to watch your videos, who's willing to like your posts on Instagram or just connect with you. But you're on Instagram and they like watching YouTube videos, or they like watching YouTube videos and they don't like listening to podcasts, and you make a podcast and that's it. Or they like reading on the between the seams. You know what I'm saying? They like reading between the seams, and you know, you don't have a blog, you just have a YouTube video. So the way I think about things, I can't do everything, but I try to do as much as I can as well as I can do it. And I think YouTube has just been something that is just a no-brainer for me. You can put the podcast on there. You can review products on there. You can talk about things that you like. You can become a thought leader on YouTube. There's so many things. Now I approach it from like a very like professional kind of way. And I don't know, I don't know if people will approach it that way, but like, I also just enjoy it. You know what I mean? Like, it's just a lot of fun to create YouTube videos. Like, the process is fun. It's hard. It's long. It takes hours to edit videos at times. Ridiculously long, especially if you want to be thorough. But at the end of the day, like, I'm really getting a lot of enjoyment out of it. And when I started, it was hard. But now that it's like, I'm kind of understanding how to hold the camera and things like that. It's been a lot more fun. So the why behind YouTube, I think, is just the opportunity. Once again, like, there's just an opportunity there. And I decided to try to see what happens.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I think YouTube is a great platform, and power to you for doing it. You know, I've personally had people approach me about YouTube, and it's just, it's not for me. And I know people might think that's a little ironic for me to say or short-sighted, but I give you power for doing it, because it's a hard platform. It's a platform that a lot of people are on. It's a platform that's hard to break into.
Totally.
But you know, when you produce quality content, it's one where you kind of can reap the benefits from there.
I think it shines through. And I think also, once again, like, I would never want anybody to want my life. Like, self-awareness for me, like, when I do any kind of podcast or talk to anybody, is so important, because like you said, it just, like, for you, just maybe isn't the right time, isn't the right moment, just isn't right for you. Like, maybe, and there's a lot of hate on YouTube as well. There's a lot of hate everywhere. But like, and people have been really, really nice. But even still, like, putting yourself out there as someone who maybe is not very confident in themselves, maybe has some pimples on their faces, growing up a young person, or even an older person who, you know, when they were young, were told that they, you know, are ugly or fat or whatever it may be, like, have those kind of self-reservations. You know, take it upon yourself to realize, like, maybe this isn't for me. I can do a podcast and still find success. You know, my mentality towards content is a unique one. Not everyone should take it, right? Now, I would never want anybody to just blatantly think that they have to start a YouTube channel. Right.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point too, because you know, different platforms allow different people to shine in different ways. You know, for me, I know I've told people a lot of this all the time. I mean, I pay my bills writing, so my blog, although blogging is not a popular form of media these days anymore, like, to me, it's like, fuck it. Like, I want to write because I genuinely enjoy writing, and that's what gives me, you know, that's what satisfies me. And same thing with the podcast, right? It's just a form of media that I think is fun. So power to you to having all these projects. But in addition to that, you're also on the team at Small Hours Magazine. Now, okay, bro, funny story about this. So for those listening, Small Hours Magazine will be an actual print magazine that will be debuting sometime in the future. When I was in college, I took a few InDesign courses for creating magazines, and I fucking love magazines. I think magazines are a beautiful, beautiful way to capture an audience. I think these days, what makes magazines special, especially if your focus isn't a magazine, it's just something extra you can sprinkle on top, right? Like a print magazine to throw in. I think that's so beautiful, bro. How did the idea with Small Hours come about? And you're working on that with Alexander Walker and Miah, correct?
Correct. Yeah. So, you know, it's interesting. I'll kind of tell you the story how I got involved with the team. I think Ray may be the best person to tell you how it got started, because he's the true originator. But I'll tell you how I got started on the team.
Sure.
And I'll try to explain it, because I've never really had it explained to me this way, but this is how I kind of think about it, right? So, you know, let's go back to last year, 2020. Alex started his very own podcast called The Fashion Collective. And as you spoke about earlier, I was pretty hungry. And I knew about Ray, obviously, through his YouTube content and from just his brand, which has, you know, just continued to grow over the years. And also I mentioned Devontae Ivory, right? So I think there's a couple kind of layers to this story. Let me actually start with Devontae Ivory. So the beginning of my brand, I started the Beyond the Garment publication, which was before the podcast. And so the publication essentially did the same thing as the podcast, kind of like what you do a little bit with Between the Seams.
Yeah.
So I used to like highlight different creatives who were doing cool things, who were just small, like just so small that no one knew about.
Right.
Just to create content for a blog. Devontae Ivory was my first guest, and I had no idea Devontae Ivory was close friends with Ray, right? So there's kind of a first touch point. And that was like in March, like so early. The brand was so early, you know what I mean? And then Alexander Walker starts his podcast. I don't know, I can't remember what month, but in 2020.
It was like during the pandemic too.
Yeah, so early in the pandemic, or relatively early in the pandemic. And I was just hungry, man. I was like, Alex, I was like, I see you got the podcast. I see you had Ray as your first guest. Like, I want to be on this podcast, man. Like, get me on this podcast, essentially. And Alex did. And Alex was nice enough to, I don't know if he did this intentionally, but he actually doubled. So like the podcast had 2 guests on it. It had me, and then it had someone else. I can't even remember. And Alex let me be first. And if you guys don't know this, like most people's attention span, it won't last to this point in the podcast unless we're doing a good job.
Right.
So like to be first in a video or be first in a podcast is key. It's key because people will listen to that first 10, 15, 20 minutes just to get an idea of what's going on, right? So he put me first. I think I did a pretty good job on the podcast. It's when we come out with 1 hoodie at the time, but I was just so hungry.
Right.
And I guess I had impressed Alex. I had to have, right? Because he knew Ray. And at some point during that same year, 2020, Ray had asked Alex, let's start this. Let's help me start the magazine. Help me build this magazine to where I want it to be. And Ray and Alex were talking, and they were essentially saying, we need another person to have another opinion. Like, who do we think would be someone that's good?
Right.
And Alex threw my name out there, and Ray DM'd me, and I had a phone call with Ray. Talked to him for the first time.
Damn.
Super chill guy, as you know.
Yeah. And
the rest is history. Now we're working on the magazine, and it's been integral, man. We have a publisher, Spring Cedars, which I helped facilitate, man, which was a lot of fun getting a lot of the editing and whatnot done for that.
Yeah.
A lot of things coming in the works. I'm not going to spill the beans yet, but it's very ambitious. It's a very ambitious project right now, and so I'm having a lot of fun doing it.
Man, that's beautiful. It's crazy how these opportunities come up. Yeah, shout out Ray, the homie. Such a nice guy. One of the hardest working people in the industry, in my opinion.
Without a doubt.
Yeah, my man just hustles. And like I mentioned earlier, man, I know a magazine might seem like an unconventional form of medium, but especially in the fashion industry, I just feel like it works.
Oh, come on. There are magazines right now, and I'm not a huge magazine guy, so I don't know the names of them, but there are tons of magazines right now, whether they showcase Bape or they showcase like Japanese textiles or they showcase I don't even know, so many things
luxury,
that are still being
high
printed.
Fashion.
Luxury, high fashion. There's the Sporty and Rich magazine. There's so many different things that are magazines. They don't get the same amount of like PR as like other things, obviously, but like they're still so dope. And there are so many people who are still consuming that like form of medium at a high rate. And it's so dope. It's very dope to me to be on the project, to be able to create a magazine.
Yeah, and what I'm looking forward to too is not only reading the stories in the magazine. From my understanding, y'all are going to be having interviews with creatives and showcasing other creatives in the magazine, which is going to be really special. But also, after you read the magazine, man, just having a small hours magazine collection on your coffee table, it's going to look beautiful,
Right there on your coffee table. That's exactly what we want to have. Just like a nice little coffee table piece, and add a little bit of beauty to your space.
For sure, 100%. Maybe have an Edward Joyner calendar next to the magazine sets and set the mood right, read some stories. It'll be great.
That's the ad campaign in the works.
Exactly. But man, we're wrapping on some pretty good time. It's always a pleasure to chop it up with you, dude. You're one of the nicest guys, I've met in and around the space. You're working really, really hard. And, I appreciate all the projects you're working on, bro. It's a pleasure to see everything kind of grow. Before we get out of here, man, anything you want to plug? Anything you want to give a shout out to?
Yeah, man. I want to first say thank you for having me on. Seriously, it was good to have you on my podcast, and being on the Selective is really, really a treat.
Yeah.
A couple of things I definitely want to plug. And, I want to be selfless here. Obviously you guys know about XR's Between the Seams. Check out that. Check out Ore NYC. Check out the Fashion Collective. Check out all the things that all these other creators are doing. And then you can check out me, which is on YouTube at Drew Joyner. Just Drew Joyner is my YouTube channel. You can follow me on Instagram at Drew Joyner _ Beyond the Garment Podcast. But let's just kind of stop it right there. And then Edward Joyner too. You can follow me at Edward Joyner Official on Instagram.
For sure.
So yeah, that's a lot of links. Just do my links. XR.
And guys, as always on the pod, man, I'll have all of Drew's links down in the description below. Please check out all the work he's doing. He's doing incredible stuff. Drew, man, appreciate you coming on the pod. For me and for Drew, guys, thank you all for listening so much to the Selective Podcast. Keep it locked in with future drops on the website, unique editorial pieces, and of course, a new podcast episode every week. Thank you all so much for the time and support, and we'll see you next week.